Maybe you've seen some of those viral videos, usually on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts, where there's a woman who comes on and she looks really distraught and sad. And she says, "My husband doesn't love me anymore," or "My husband just told me that he's leaving me." And then you see the husband in the background who says something like, "All I said was that we weren't going shopping today," or "I didn't want to go shopping today," or something like that, where, and there was this kind of surprise or this twist, and the woman would respond back and say something like, "It's the same thing." So the reason that's funny, the reason why people find that humorous, is because it points to something that actually is going on in all of our brains a lot of the time. And it speaks to a kind of cognitive bias. And I talk about the coherence bias, but it's not really that. What it is in this case, though, is this tendency to want to jump from observation to interpretation too quickly as we're gathering data about something. So when you're in the middle of solving a problem, or you're in some kind of gameplay like a metaphorical or literal treasure hunt or something like that, we know that we have to gain information. We have to find out, what is the situation? So we try to gain information. Maybe that comes through conversations. Maybe it comes through something that you're reading. You could be reading clues if it's a game. You're collecting this information from various sources, and you're gathering it, and you're making sense of it. And as you do, there's a real temptation to try to look for patterns right away. And so you collect a little bit of information, just a few statements or a few pieces of information. Already you're beginning to notice a pattern, and you've developed a kind of theory or an interpretation of where it's all leading. And the problem with that is that sometimes that theory then colors everything else that you see. So now that you gain any new information, and you're sort of reinterpreting it. You're trying to make it fit your theory because you want that coherence. You want it to work, and you want it to look good. So let's talk about this a bit. I want to talk about how we can actually overcome this, or even use this tendency of our brains in a way that can lead toward clearer thinking, better problem solving, and engaging in successful metaphorical and literal treasure hunts. So the first item I want to talk about is the idea of observation, of verifying the things that you observe. So you're gaining input from various sources. It could be in a game, it could be clues. For those who watch this and they're in the John Collins Black Treasure Hunt, it's the book with all of the clues that are hidden within it in different ways. It could be the information you're gathering related to some kind of problem or situation you're trying to solve in a conversation. It could be the feedback that you're getting from groups of people. And as you're doing it, just because you're getting the information doesn't mean that it's reliable information, right? There are intentional and unintentional red herrings that we experience all the time. In fact, I have a recent video that's specifically on the idea of red herrings, where it's something that's intentionally trying to mislead, or it could just be that people you're gathering facts, and they're not actually facts. They are incorrect, or they have partial truth and partial falsehood in them. And so if you're going to base a theory on claims, on information that's only partially true, it's likely going to lead you in the wrong direction. So that's something that we want to be careful about, is to take the time and try to do some verification. Well, what is real? What is true? You ask people, they give you some information. Just because they tell you and you believe them and you trust them doesn't mean that they're actually 100% right on it. So that's some of the work that we have to do. So that's one bucket where we devote some time to actually collecting as much information as we can that's relevant. And you don't want to go too much, but a reasonable amount, and doing the work of verifying it and validating it. Then we can go to the second one. And I would say that the first step is just to make a mental note that there is a difference between observation and interpretation. Right? So say someone comes up to you and they shout a phrase at you like, "Get out of the room," and they look angry. So observation, though, would be simply making a note that this person has, with a very loud voice, and maybe you describe their facial features as they're saying it, and they say the phrase, "Get out of the room." That's the observation. Now, the interpretation is that they're mad at me and they don't want me in here. But that may not actually be what's happening. Maybe there is a danger in the room, and they're trying to warn you of it, and you misinterpreted the signals as anger. So you get the difference, right? So it's important for us to acknowledge and just try to do an unbiased and neutral observation without jumping to conclusions as much as possible, so that we can practice distinguishing between observation and interpretation. Because the reality is we have to make those shortcuts a lot in life all the time. You're observing and interpreting very quickly. And sometimes you can develop a bit of a lazy habit of combining those without recognizing the differences of them. And while some people can be really good at getting the right interpretations with limited amount of information, it's also going to mislead sometimes if we do that, if we're not careful. So the first one is, again, verifying and that the information coming in is actually true and real. And then a second is teaching yourself to separate observation and interpretation. Then the third thing that we can do to address this is what I would call informal grounded theory. Now, I'm a ethnographic qualitative researcher by training, and and one of the methods of research that's used formally is something called grounded theory. And I'm going to describe it to you, not because I'm saying you have to do this formally, but there's a habit, a pattern of thinking in this formal research that can actually be used all of us in our daily life and in different kinds of situations. So grounded theory, in a very simplified form, is this. It's usually used to try to answer a question. I remember there was a doctoral dissertation that I read years ago, and it was a grounded theory, and it was on the question, why do college students fall asleep in class? And so in order to answer that, the researcher found a population of students who had fallen asleep in college classes recently or relatively recently, different situations, and had a pool of students, and then conducted these interviews with the students. And after the interviews, gathered all that information. After the interviews, had it all transcribed, and then broke out all of the key statements about the conversation. And then after doing all of that, maybe going through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people, then would look at the different statements that were provided and looked for and you look for patterns. The researcher looked for patterns. And then based upon those patterns, you would develop a tentative theory. And this researcher developed a tentative theory. And maybe the theory is college students fall asleep in class because they're really tired, because they've been working a lot, they're sick, there are external factors that are really the main cause for why students typically fall asleep in class. But that's not where you stop. So maybe that's what the initial pool of data kind of looks like, but now you continue with the other interviews and you keep going. And each time you get a new interview, you test your theory against that new information to see if it's still holding up. And over time, that will cause you to have to revise your theory. So, because your theory has to be able to accommodate all of the instances, if possible. And then you'll come up with what they would call a grounded theory. And in this case, the research was, it concluded after doing about 18 to 25 interviews, I think it was something like that, that the reason that students fall asleep in class is not necessarily because they're tired, physically tired, but it's because they're experiencing what the researcher called perceived meaninglessness, that they did not see the relevance or the meaning in the class, and that when one is experiencing perceived meaningless, they have a higher chance of falling asleep in a class. Now, does that hold up over time across larger populations? That's one of the limitations of qualitative studies. But for this particular population of students, that theory explained accurately the pool of people who were interviewed. So that's the formal idea of a grounded theory. But this simple framework can be used in an informal way in our own thinking and our own problem solving and metaphorical and literal treasure hunting as well. So you gather information, a reasonable amount of information, and then in that you start to look and see if there are possible patterns. And maybe you have a couple of theories, 2 or 3 or 4 theories. Maybe you narrow it down to one, and then you gain new information. And as you gain that new information, you test your theory with that new information? Does it accommodate the new information or not? Now, there's always a danger because sometimes you can try to force new information to fit, and you can also get caught into the trap of only paying attention to the information that does fit your theory. So we have to be conscious of that. That is one of the limitations of this approach or strategy, but it's a useful thinking, heuristic, problem-solving tool, and it can be useful if you're aware of its limitations and its problems. So there you have what I call the informal, grounded theory approach to observation and interpretation. And then you got to practice it, right? Here's an example. Like, say you're actually playing a game, and it's a treasure hunt, and there's a poem, and the poem uses the word falls. And you might ask, first of all, did it actually say falls and not fails, F-A-I-L-S? Was there a misspelling, a misreading? So that's the factual part, the observation. Just make sure you're verifying and testing it. Is it a lowercase f or a capital F, because it is a proper name or not? So you're paying attention. You're just doing really careful observation, and that's it. You're just noting the word and what it says specifically and accurately, and nothing else. Nothing more, nothing less. And then you can get into these kind of sort of speculative theories as you go through the poem and you gather a little bit more information, as you see a few other clues, and it seems like it might be referring to a waterfall. So then you can kind of test the rest of the poem with that waterfall theory. Does it hold up or not? You can kind of play around with some different theories. And then you keep gathering more clues and more information before you commit to any actual theory. Now, in the treasure hunt world, I love the idea of what people call a solve. When people refer to a solve in the treasure hunting world, it doesn't typically mean I definitively have it figured out. I know absolutely 100% without any doubt at all. What a solve means is I have a potential solution. I have a theory of what may actually be the answer. And then you have to actually test it out, though. And that's where you'll know whether or not that theory is holding up, testing it with additional information, ideally testing it with real experiments, like boots on the ground in a treasure hunt. If it's a problem you're trying to solve, you do like an experiment, or like what some call even a minimally viable product. You come up with a simplified version of a solution. You test it out, see if it works or something like that. But this can all really help with that trap that we get into of merging observation and interpretation. We want to split those out and get ourselves on the track to clear thinking and better problem solving and truth seeking. I hope you find this useful. I look forward to your comments.